today I'm sitting down with Mike Lawrence, professor at University of New England. So Mike, thanks for sitting down with us today. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little intro about what you do?
Sure thing. So I am a professor. I'm in the physical therapy department, but I'm actually a biomechanist. So a lot of my time, or where Travis knows me from, is the biomechanics lab and program back in Ball State. I'm also a competitive powerlifter. Been lifting about almost 16 years competitively as well. Really, that drove my interest to get into biomechanics and how to get stronger. I usually tell people I got in biomechanics to try to get my squat higher. So it actually worked pretty well. So I teach kinesiology. I do a lot of research with done stuff on the safety squat bar and stuff on lifting. So really my big thing is research training, research from biomechanics perspective.
Okay, there we go. Okay, it's recording, so I'll be able to go back and edit all this stuff later. But yeah, so you're in a PT program right now?
Yeah, I work for the University of New England, so I'm in their physical therapy department up here.
Okay, and then are you still running the lab for biomechanics?
Yeah, we call it a motion analysis lab. So I manage that, and also I've started teaching more. So I'm teaching like the kinesiology now and some research courses too.
Okay, so is that a little different as far as people they've had in the past who have, I know not all PTs are going to lift, and especially lift heavy and do the things that you do, but I would imagine it's something different than anything they've seen, right?
Yeah, I think it gives them like a good perspective, though. I mean, they should all know how to do like a good squat and good movements. So it's biomechanist teaching that is probably not a bad thing.
Right. Yeah, man. That's so we've got. I'm trying to think. The last time I talked to you was probably when I was an undergrad at Ball State. So it's been a while, but
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm out here in Lawrence, Kansas, and we've got 2 gyms, and we do sports performance predominantly. And anyway, so we try to hook up with some local physical therapist to outsource, what's out of our scope of practice, essentially. So
Yeah.
Anyway, there's some PTs that we run into that definitely have lifting experience that you can tell they've been to the gym a time or two, and then there's some other PTs that have not. You can tell they've never really lifted weights before. They've done a lot of textbook work, but not so much like hands-on practical from a lifting standpoint. So it helps when you can find PTs who have done that.
Yeah, I had one of them tell me once that I shouldn't hold my breath when I squatted heavy. So.
Oh yeah, what is that?
Because blood pressure, and I like my spine in one piece.
I think you'll be okay here.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I thought of you because that video I sent you of that kid.
Oh yeah,
dude,
that was a disaster.
So I'm not sure. So you're in New England. I'm not sure how close. There's a guy I sat down with, Christopher Tabor.
Mm-hmm.
He does a lot of AEL research, and I think I'm trying to remember where he's from. Can't remember if it's Holy Cross or one of those New England schools that's out there. But anyway, he does a lot of AEL research, and I sent the same video to him. I'm like, hey, Chris, like thoughts on this? He's like, not a good idea. Just not good. So that was what made me think of you, because I think you do more accommodating resistance research than anybody I know of.
I've done some, yeah. We've kind of branched out, but definitely that's like my thesis was on. We definitely use it a lot.
Yeah.
We've done a little bit of playing in the lab that we haven't published. It's got some, it's cool. It's always hard to set up.
Yeah.
They're not thrilled with me drilling holes into the concrete for bands and stuff.
So, like what's the threshold then? I mean, like do you just, I think the first thing is, can a kid demonstrate proficiency with a squat pattern 10 times in a row? Can they do that with light resistance before adding accommodating? I mean, what are your prerequisites for adding accommodating?
Yeah, just like general strength and good technique's always a good place to start, because like you said, if they can't do it with the simple things, if you can't do a bodyweight squat, then trying to make it harder is not going to help. And putting a band on something makes it harder. Putting chains on things makes it harder. You might make it lighter at the bottom, but you're still challenging them with the instability of the chains or the elastic, tension of the bands. So, um, and even just to people who aren't used to, they can be kind of strong if they've never done it before. You put it on them, and then you'll see them get like pulled around all over the place. So,
Yeah.
I've had some really strong guys I train with who they never use bands. We put them with bands, and then their first 3 reps are terrible. They haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah.
But
So
they'll be better than someone who that's 40% of their max.
right. So I guess the first place to start, because I need to go through. I'm still getting used to doing these types of interviews and talking with guys. So forgive me if my style is not dialed in yet, but I'll go through and chop it up so it makes sense and it flows nicely. But I guess the first place to start is, what is your general training philosophy for, let's just say a general athlete where they're coming in and lifting 2 to 3 times a week?
In terms
like how would you lay out? Like, let's start with your general principles that you adhere to.
So yeah, I mean, it's always the big ones, the progressive overload. The more I've trained, the more I've thought. I think rest is more important than almost anything else. If you're fatigued over and over coming in again, you're not worth anything. Like you're just gonna hurt yourself. Yeah.
Right.
So, and I know, especially like with guys in your position, because I train mostly powerlifters. So I've got my people, and our technique training is the lifting itself usually.
Right.
So I'm in a slightly different, better place than you have to train an athlete. I've never thought that you should try to make things too specific in the gym. Like I've seen people, try to use weighted bats or use like hyper specific things with weights. And my general philosophy, guys, is just make them a better athlete, make them stronger, make them more explosive, work on the components of being an athlete, and then they have to put that together to perform in the sport.
Right. So do you see that often as like athletes are trying to basically be a power lifter and do things they see powerlifters do and forget that, powerlifting is a sport in and of itself, right?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, barely, but yeah.
Barely. But yeah, I mean, because I see some of that, on social media where, like when I was talking to Professor Tabor and he was saying like, I would ask the guys at the highest level of whatever weightlifting sport, whether it's weightlifting or powerlifting or whatever, what were they doing 10 to 15 years ago?
Yeah.
As opposed to what they're doing now. Because I see things that you do and I've seen you train before, but last time I saw you lift in person was probably 2008, 2009, maybe.
Yeah. It's changed a little. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're not doing the same thing you were doing then. And I'm sure you have when did you start lifting?
Started competing in powerlifting my freshman year of college. So I was 18 and it was 2004. So moving on, getting close to 16 years.
Okay. So 16 years, your training has evolved a ton.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I got started off at a pretty good setup when I got to Ball State because I was training with Matt Wedding. Introduced me to the conjugate style.
Yep.
So most of my training has been conjugate, where people think, they immediately think bands and chains.
Right.
But it's more about what are you trying to achieve with that band or with that chain. The overload's one thing, but is it bar speed? Trying to be fast against and accommodating resistance? Are you trying to fight through the stability of the chain? If you have them a couple inches off the floor and they're swinging. I view my things now more of like, what's my daily goal? Is it to be fast? Is it to try to build muscle? Is it to just try to strain? And not to serve too many masters in one day with that. Like I don't have 5 goals I go on.
It's just way too many. You won't get anything done. Is that kind of the philosophy you have with that? Yeah. So do you have two like, does that stick with the West Side format? Like 2 max efforts, 2 speed efforts a week, or?
So I did some more, that's how I started to train. Probably like my sophomore, junior year of college. And I did that for a while. And then I switched to raw lifting about the gear, just belts and a belt and knee wraps. I looked for something different because I had to build more muscle. I couldn't rely on the gear anymore. So have you heard the daily undulating periodization?
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of what I got into, but I've got a very big powerlifting slant to it. In our last 6 weeks before the meet, really looked like West Side almost,
Gotcha.
but we phase into that. So
Okay. Yeah, I heard. I saw a YouTube video the other day with Dave Tate where he was talking about, you know, looking back, how long would it take if you would get really, really comfortable with the gear, and how you would get the most out of it versus training raw up to like 2 weeks removed from a meet. And what he was saying was that's what he used to do, was like you train raw as much as possible, and then you put the gear on 2 weeks, 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, but then you don't get the full strength of the gear itself, you know?
yeah, I mean it's all like technique based, right? With the gear,
Because I've never used any of that stuff, so I don't know what it feels like. But I've seen the
terrible.
guys, I've seen the guys put it on,
Yeah,
and
it's you've got to be stronger than the gear you're wearing.
mm,
You can't let it push you around. And what I usually tell guys who get into it at first was go to where it hurts the most, because if we're trying to pull you in and push you, you push against that. So you're stronger than it, and you push it where it wants, where you want it to go, not the other way around.
okay,
But it's you saw some huge jumps in the gear lifting a few years ago, and people were getting 300 plus pounds out of a bench shirt. So I mean, I was getting. Granted, I didn't train raw at the time, but I pressed I think 425 at a push pull meet just to see what I could do,
hmm,
and I just pressed like 666 before that, or 661 before
good,
that.
yeah. So
So
definitely advantage.
yeah, yeah.
So
Get to know your tools. Yeah,
what do you do now? Like, I mean, is it completely raw for you now, or are you still doing some geared stuff?
just a belt and knee wraps.
Okay.
Yeah, I got away from it. I actually got away from it with the idea of I was going to go back to it,
Hmm.
but I was getting to the point where I felt like I was like walking a very thin line of, if I don't get stronger, then this gear I'm trying to put on, my suit's got to be so tight to handle this weight. If I don't get stronger, it's going to break me. So I went to raw, and then that really took off, and that's where the competition is now. So I've kind of stayed there.
Has the technology gotten better with this stuff at all?
It probably peaked around 6, 7 years ago. It's been pretty steady since then.
Okay,
But the gear lifting's it's not as popular as it used to be either.
gotcha.
Or not as popular. And CrossFit really helped powerlifting and overall. They've really filled out a bunch of powerlifting competitions.
So are you seeing a lot of CrossFitters come and compete in
Yep.
powerlifting meets just for the sake of competition, or what are they
Hey,
doing?
for them, it's just a fun thing to do. And then if they like it, then they start training for it too.
Right.
Like CrossFitters can be really strong.
Yeah.
It's a great thing about powerlifting. Anyone can get stronger. So
Yeah.
you'd see these especially female, like these athletes come and all of a sudden make huge jumps, and they're taking state records and region records and a national record here and there. I think it's just the evolution of the kind of the sport. It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I remember when CrossFit was first getting started, and like, people were not like, A, the awareness was not there, but B, so the numbers weren't there, the awareness wasn't there, but just in general the strength didn't seem to be there. But now that it's really got some traction and some attention, I mean, man, like if you're not like cleaning like 150 kilos, you're not competitive,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. Yeah.
So everything else, I mean, I'm sure has gone through the roof.
Yeah. And I saw that happen with especially the squats, because my best lift is by far the squat. I don't know if you know the name Eric Lillibridge.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
squatted 800 at 275, which was really kind of unheard of at the time.
Hmm.
And 6 months later, so he squatted 850, and then he was closing up on 9. I think at that time there was only like 4 or 5 guys who squatted 800.
Hmm.
And I think at one point I was ranked 13th in the squat in the country.
At the 275.
The 275s was like an 800-pound squat. And now
Wow.
at an 825, I'm like 50 something, if not more.
Wow.
So, I mean, internet, the knowledge, and everything out there is really just it's pushing all the barriers.
Yeah, because like we deal with, we've probably got, at this moment, we've probably got around 90-ish athletes that come in between high school, college, a couple professional guys when they're here. And it's more of the male demographic of the high school kids that see all of this stuff on Instagram.
Yeah.
And like one of them I was having a conversation with the other day, like we do all, at this point in time, I think 99% of our athletes are just doing straight weight because they haven't kind of earned that right to do any type of band or chain work. It's a matter of, well, your sport comes first, but then, making sure that we're not interfering with your sport. The thing after that is, getting better and better and better with heavier and heavier straight weights, as opposed to accommodating resistance. Not because I think it's bad or wrong, but just this is where we're at right now.
You got to start at the beginning.
Yeah, and I was showing him a couple of your videos the other day. I said, look, this guy's been lifting for at least 15 years. Look at what he's doing with one, like he's just using bands, or he's only using chains, or only weight releasers or a specialty bar. It's not all three, like that video I sent you where there's.
And trust me, I've tried that. I remember when I was undergrad, I was messing around in the Ball State's athletic weight room, and I just wanted to see one day. So I hooked up like reverse bands and bands and like everything I could find in the gym to one bar and see what it felt like. I was like, wow, okay, really light the bottom, really heavy the top. But
and that's how, you experiment with it a little bit and try it out.
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah. You're always playing with new things, but yeah, if you look at what the top tier lifters did, the geared lifters, they squat close to 1,200 pounds. They were using maybe 500-600 pounds of band tension.
Jesus.
So they're using 50%, but they're also in gear. They're also trying to squat world records.
Mm-hmm.
And they've probably all got 15 to 20 years experience under their belt.
Yeah.
They're just genetic freaks, which that happens too.
Right.
Your athletes probably aren't that.
Right. Right.
None of my powerlifters are that.
Yeah. They're focused on, the athletes are definitely focused on, baseball, basketball, football. That's their thing. And, I don't think they understand the concept of, like, you devote a huge amount of your time to get really, really, really good at your sport. How long did it take you to get to an 825 squat,
Yeah. About 15 years. Yeah.
But yeah. And then, so as far as, I want to talk a little more about accommodating resistance, because I don't know much. I understand the general usage of like the how and the when, but like when would you use, bands coming from the bottom, and then what does that do for a squat, for example?
Yeah. So the very simple thing is, the top's heavier, the bottom's lighter.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at that on the way up, it's getting harder and harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually teaches you to keep pushing through something.
Okay.
So if you think about the bench press, if you got a barbell, just straight weight, and it's light, and you push it, you'll probably give it an initial push and then let off a little bit without even knowing, because you don't want to throw it.
True.
So you put some bands on there, and if you just give that a little initial push, it's not going to go as far. It's going to come kind of back down at you if you don't keep on pushing against it.
Okay.
So we'll use that to teach people to keep on pushing through something.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for powerlifting, when you've got a heavy weight and it stops moving, and you've got to get it moving again. That's something you got to do. That time under tension, push against it. The bands, especially though, depending on how you hook them up, they can pull you down faster in gravity too. So it'll increase your eccentric forces too.
Okay. If
you need someone to work on handling large eccentric forces, and this is why you don't want to do this with just a high school kid in the first 6 months, you get crushed.
Right.
Because they're not good at handling, their technique's not there yet. They're not honed in yet.
Mm-hmm.
That band's going to try to throw them through the floor, especially if it's one of the heavier ones. So I look at a couple different things. Do I want to get a big overload out of it, if that's my reason? Do I want to fight against something that's going to get really hard really fast?
Mm-hmm.
And then do I want to be able to work that eccentric and that pop off the bottom? So I do have different, strategies in mind when I use them. And that'll probably depend on my band choice too.
Okay.
Like you'll see people out there using 500 or 600 pounds of band tension for an overload. We do a circuit max for our last little peaking phase. We use about 100 pounds of band tension on the overload.
Okay.
And over the past 5 years, it's held fairly true that the weight, the bar weight plus the band weight at the top is our third attempt, our best day third attempt. We can get within, I think I've gotten within 10 or 15 pounds of it every time.
Wow. Okay, so you're
So
consistent with that.
it's amazing how consistent it is with it, but it's just a little bit of overload that I need. So I'm not getting beat up because I don't have all that weight in the hole. I've only got about half of it, but I'm still preparing my body for that weight, a week and a half later when I take it.
Gotcha. Now, as far as like flipping the bands and going reverse band tension, so what's the application there? Like, how and why would you use that?
So yeah, people that call it like the lightning method, or if they hear it wrong, they'll call it the lightning method too. And the idea is, I've seen that used a lot more for people who they think whoever's lifting, they need like a mental boost of seeing how much more weight's on the bar.
Okay.
And it essentially does a similar thing. The part that I hardly ever use them because I don't like they slow you down on the eccentric.
Okay.
Like bands pulling down will speed you up. Bands pulling upward will slow you down. And I try to be fairly explosive in my lifts. So if the bar is not coming down as fast as I want, to me that's a problem. But it's a similar idea of the overload there, but it's more of a plate weight overload, just deloaded by the bands. But it does affect how the bar forces are. Okay.
Now, as far as chains, what are you trying to accomplish with chains when you're hooking them up?
I think chains are actually a better place for most people to start than the bands, because they just pull with the force of gravity.
Yep.
They don't have as much, the elastic tension is not there on the chains like it is with the bands. So those are a little more challenging to be stable, though. Especially if you have a couple of links off the floor, then it can be really challenging. So we try to leave a link or two on the floor. That can be hard depending on if you have a tall person and a short person working together. Kind of got to adjust that.
Yep.
Similar idea. It gets harder, so you have to grind all the way up through them. But it's easier on the eccentric for the lifter.
Okay. So you could essentially, I mean, is that a place where you'd use technique with those guys? Like, hey, you need to stay tight and on your descent for longer, and then just one rep out of the bottom where it's full speed.
Yeah, still have them try to move fast with the chains.
Okay. Even on the eccentric portion.
Yeah, I teach most of my lifters just to move how they want the weight to move. And granted, on a max attempt, you'll move a little slower.
Gotcha.
But I see more often than not people get timid with heavy weights when you really can't be timid with a heavy weight.
Okay.
And they're usually more comfortable with the chains because as you go down, they deload so it doesn't feel as hard. I think the chains are really good for like upper back work. So maintaining the torso and chest up in the head position. Because when you're coming up, if you think it's just like it's storing more weight on you as you go up, that's kind of really challenging your position. If you can't hold that well, you'll lose it right there.
Right. So it could almost be like a mental aspect on the chains on the descent. Like so you're feeling confident heading into the concentric action, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you unrack and be like, wow, this is really, really heavy. But as you start going down, like, okay, maybe I can do this. And then once they get it moving, like, oh, I can get it moving. They just got to keep it moving, that's the hard part. But a little bit of the mental help there, but feeling light at the bottom is a good thing.
So do you like people doing these, bands and chains? Do you like them doing them for 1 rep, 10 reps? What's the typical program?
I've changed over the years, but most of the time we'll use them for maybe at the most 5 reps, but usually more in the 1 to 3s.
Okay.
The accommodating resistance, what I'm looking to get there is a little bit of an overload with it. If I'm trying to build muscle with like 10s and 12s, I'd rather use a straight weight.
Gotcha.
it just seems, I think you'd be skipping too much of the portion of the lift for that many reps and trying to get that much volume in.
Gotcha. Okay. And then something else I've seen you guys do, which we've only got a couple different bars. I wish we had the variety that you guys have.
Yeah.
Because it looks like, do you have a Duffalo bar
Yeah.
or Buffalo bar?
Yeah. The
Buffalo
Duffalo one. Yeah.
So we've got all Ohio bars that are, most athletes are using those, and then we've got a safety squat bar and a camber. But I saw you squatting with a safety squat with look like some chains out front.
Yeah. I stole that idea from Matt Winning. I saw him doing it, so I took it. I just had a welder take a bolt and put a chain and put a handle on there, because a lot of people try to cheat the safety squat bar.
Okay.
If you push up on the handles like that, it will make it feel tighter, but it also shifts the center of mass of the bar backwards on you,
Okay.
and it actually puts it in an easier position.
So this keeps you in a harder position longer.
Yeah, so if you have just the chains in your hands, and you'll see people try to push and they can't, it doesn't do anything.
Gotcha.
So it makes you really focus a lot more on trying to hold your upper back tight.
Okay. So if I take my safety squat bar, do I cut the handles off, put that bolt in there, and then put the chains on?
Ours had screw-on handles, so
Okay. So you've got the Elite FTS one.
yeah, the Elite one, yeah.
Okay. So I can do that.
That's the same one. We actually took that in the lab and did a test on it too. We had, an undergrad published a paper on it.
Okay.
So it actually does work more like upper back muscles than
Okay.
a normal bar, which if you ever used one, you definitely feel that for sure.
Okay. Well, thanks for that tidbit. That'll be something we can mess around with and hopefully find a welder here somewhere.
Yeah.
But something else. So we've got, just like a regular camber bar. Something else I've seen is like a spider camber bar.
Yeah.
I'd really like to get my hands on one of those, but that's basically, and then we've got trap bars. Like that's basically our variety. So can you go over like why the variety of bars are like for us? It's like, well, if we've got a kid who has a broken wrist or can't externally rotate their shoulder, it makes sense to go to a squat, safety squat bar.
Well, sure. Yeah.
But for you, I mean, when you guys are rotating bars, like what's the reasoning there?
Usually just to get a different stimulus from it. I also use, and I'll put in a safety squat bar or the Camber bar if I want a intensity deload.
Okay.
Because you can't do as much weight as a safety squat bar. You shouldn't do it. Some people can. I don't know how, but
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of people do it. Experienced lifters definitely shouldn't be able to. So if I want them to still strain against something,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want them to have to use 90+%,
Right.
in a safety squat bar or the Camber bar, depending on if I want to work more upper back or more, holding the low back in good position. And then they're still going to strain really, really hard. It's still going to be a max effort or a near max effort, which is what we want to get to. But the overall loading is not that hard, not that rough.
Gotcha.
We actually do a week of that. We use it as a deload week. We call it hard, not heavy. So one of my favorite things to do with that is take the safety squat bar, sit the people on a box and do a concentric only with the safety squat bar. And I'll even we usually throw some chains on there too. So as you stand up, you've got, 120 pounds of chain adding on to it too.
Okay.
So for triples, which that sounds like it'd be really heavy, 120 pounds of chain.
Yeah.
You can't put much plate weight on there.
Right.
So
you're starting from zero.
Yeah.
Like
just
sitting on that box.
Get on and take a breath, hold it for a second and go. And it's really, really hard. But the stress, if I'm training for an 800-pound squat, I will not get anywhere close to 800 pounds on my back for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I use that as like a deload in between a couple of our heavier weeks.
Okay. I like that as far as an intensity deload. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
So, and then, so that leads right into my next question as far as some things that I've seen you do with, it looks like boxes of various heights with foam versus, like straight sitting on a box. Like I think most of this is going to be for our high school kids who listen in on this, because sometimes there's 2 6A high schools here in Lawrence, and it is even if the strength coach is very, very good, I don't know what their philosophy is. I don't know what their principles and methods are, and that coach cannot possibly watch all 50 kids in a class.
Yeah.
So we have some kids who, most of them are going to, just free squat when they come in. Some will box squat, and we'll teach them, hey, you're just going to use the box as a point of reference. You're going to squat to the box, soft touch, stand up. Others were inheriting from other performance programs where, they've been taught to sit down and relax completely at the bottom for an extended period of time. So could you talk a little bit about box squatting versus like the touch and go or the sit down and relax, like when and why, and like what's the difference there?
Yeah. So, I always like the touch and go. That's usually more of like a depth finder, just to make
Mm-hmm.
sure they're close to depth. I won't even say that they're always at depth because they'll shift back and forth on you and can kind of change that. I use the box to teach people how to squat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whenever I bring anyone new in and just they want to learn how to squat, that's what I start them with because it first of all gives them kind of a sense of safety.
Yeah.
If I fall over, because when I start messing with them, they feel like they're going to fall over at first. 'Cause I, have them sit back a little more than they used to
Yep.
usually. Um, and it gives them a tactile feel too. So, like most people, when they think to sit down, they think about their butt hitting it 1st.
Mm-hmm.
I want their hamstrings to hit it first.
Okay.
So that kind of gets rid of that posterior pelvic tilt, hopefully.
Yep.
Um, that's usually a big problem because then that causes issue with the lumbar spine. But we'll start with that. And then it just gives them a chance to kind of stop and see where they are a little bit, feel where they are, and
Mm-hmm.
then break up the concentric eccentric too. So I usually start people with that. I do prefer that they come down and they stop on it and come back up. There's like at least an instantaneous pause. I'm trying to break that concentric eccentric chain
Mm-hmm.
and teach them how to control a weight down and stop it and not just bounce off the box.
Right.
It's obviously not a good thing if they go down and just bounce the pelvis off the box either.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the foam, if you use it right, is ridiculously hard.
Yeah.
Uh, you, you sit into it, and I didn't realize until I got called on it. I wasn't sitting all the way down onto the foam because you feel it at first, and then you go a little more, and okay, I'm sitting down, but you're not.
Right.
You go until the whole thing's completely compressed, so it takes like an extra second or two.
Which is an eternity when
It's
you're
an
squatting.
eternity in your heavy weight. So you've got to sit there and hold your position. So if someone's coming down and like plopping on the box, sometimes we'll throw foam on there and just be like, go all the way down until you stop moving at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that kind of teaches you some patience with that.
So it reinforces good technique and position and that kind of thing.
Yeah, or it lets me show what they'll do if they think they're sitting. Sometimes they'll just start to tilt their pelvis, that posterior pelvic tilt, which then that leads to back to how we fix that with them. But the foam, if they're kind of bouncing, we'll throw that in sometimes. The box is a pretty big staple for us.
Mm-hmm.
I usually prefer a box squat. That's what I was taught to squat on. That's like my go-to. I even like how athletic are you? Can you box squat?
Mm-hmm.
It seems funny from like a guy who trains more athletes, but to me, it's
No, that's
like it's an open chain movement. Closed chain movement? Can you control your body
right.
with
Yeah.
it? You stop when you know whether you know that box is.
Right. No, and that's one thing that I think early on I was almost snobbish about, was like, well, no, I'm mainly Olympic based, so I've got to do this. I have to do this, and there's nothing else, and
Yeah.
like as I've gotten older, I don't know how much I've actually matured, but as I've gotten older, it's more of, as long as the principles are adhered to, it's, the methods can be talked about, discussed, and
Yeah.
like so far I'm probably going to steal 3 or 4 ideas from you that I like, and like add them to my toolbox as far as what can you use.
Yeah, what you gotta do. So I remember I once had a really good conversation with Coach Roberson.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole thing, because he was Olympic based,
Right.
and I was powerlifting based. But really, we're talking about it, and what we're looking for is like a triple extension.
Yeah.
From it all.
Yep.
And you can be explosive with a squat. You can be explosive with a hang. you can produce more power with a hang clean. But my thing with that is how long is it going to take you someone to hang clean well?
Mm-hmm.
I'm better at teaching the box squat. I can get them to get that in 10 minutes or less.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just kind of more, what are you comfortable with? What are your methods, I think?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think that's, so when I was doing my master's work at IU, my final thing was, I went up to Wisconsin lacrosse and I was basically a GA up there for a semester, and met, Dr. Tim Sukamol before, while he was finishing his master's, while he was finishing his master's at Lax. But I remember his whole point was he got into a discussion argument with, some coach about teaching a hang clean or a snatch. And Tim's position was basically like, well, if we want to cut down on teaching time, why don't we just eliminate the catch? Like let's take out the you're always going to have some risk with everything, but let's take that risk down as much as possible and do a jump or do a high pull or something like that with, again, the underlying principle he has. And, is, can you produce force quickly or not? And let's do that with what you're good at. And for him, he's backed that up a lot of different ways, jump shrugs, high pulls from various positions and all that stuff. So I think I think you're right. I think it all comes down to what you're good at and then getting someone to do it better and better and better with heavier and heavier weights. Like, again, returning to progressive overload.
And I'm not the guy you want teaching you how to Olympic lift because I'm terrible at them. So.
But man, I remember I was participating in a study that you were doing at Ball State where it was like I think it was like a 8 or 12 week powerlifting program.
Yeah.
And man, like I just got my ass kicked. Like as far as like, like I remember I squatted the most I've ever squatted, and the hardest part was learning the technique to get it right. I mean, I thought I was a decent deadlifter at the time, and looking back, I was a garbage deadlifter. But at the time, I was looking at it and I'm like, holy shit, we've been spending 45 minutes on my deadlift technique and how it needs to get better and fixed and all that stuff. But it's definitely a turning point for me because it looked like I've got to get a lot better. And if these guys are telling me that it's not there, then I've got to take a step back and practice. This shit's hard.
Yeah. But unless there are some people who are just really good at certain things, but the majority of us have to practice. It is like a sports skill, especially if you want to go at the highest weight you possibly can, because that's where half an inch makes a difference.
Yep.
Half an inch does not make a difference to me on a 500-pound deadlift. I'll pick it up no matter what. 700, yeah, that's probably going to be a little rougher if I don't get that.
Right. Yeah, man. And there's something else I was going to mention. Shit. It'll come back to me in a minute. But yeah, I just remember doing that study and like getting my deadlift picked apart, and then the squatting. Oh, that's what it is getting these other kids. Like I'll talk to them a lot about, they think they can just come in and like sling weight on, like they've seen guys who are at elite levels doing on social media. And it's like, man, you've got to take smaller jumps to keep your technique honed in. And they forget that lifting weights is a skill. Just like lifting weights at 70% is a skill, 80%, 90%, 100%. Those are all very specific skill sets. Just like, when they're coming in and practicing their hitting or fielding or pitching, those are all very specific skills that I couldn't do, that you wouldn't expect me to do it well from day one. And I think they assume that the training is just like, oh, I can come in and sling on weight. There's no technique involved or whatever.
But I mean, if you look at the very best lifters, their lifts, no matter how heavy or light, they look the same.
Yeah. Yep.
They're ingrained.
Yeah.
They're almost automatic. And usually towards the end, when I get towards the meet, it's kind of interesting because, usually I have a checklist of things when I'm getting ready for a lift. Do this, do this, do this. Focus on whatever I got to focus on for that lift, which generally are the same. Sometimes they change. But the last few lifts of training, and then especially at the meet, it's really just squat. Like it just go down and do what you do type of thing. And it's funny. I started to tell some lifters because they'll get nervous when they get up close to a max, But I was like, just doesn't matter what's on the bar. Just do the exact same thing we've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Your whole goal is to do everything the exact same.
Right.
Because if you do that, and then if it's too much weight, it's too much weight. You've done all you can do for it.
Right.
Basically, stay the same and try real hard. That's all you got to
do. Sounds so simple, you know?
I mean, you got good technique. If your technique's not good, then you're in trouble. But
and man, that's the other thing that I think that we talk to athletes about all the time is intent is what matters.
Yeah.
You know, like regardless of what we put on there, to apply maximal intent to every lift is very hard to do. And especially when you're dealing with kids who are under 18 who, you know, like looking around, it's like
they're completing the reps, but they're not going through with the focus of it.
Yeah. You got to have that dialed in and that focus for that rep and that rep only, not just going on cruise control, going through the motions.
Yeah.
So it's something we work on daily with these guys.
We would probably all fall back into that at some point in their training of, you know,
yep.
just zone out with it. But yeah, I agree. Like if you don't go in there with the intent of moving the bar as fast as possible, as hard as possible, you're not going to get your training effect from it.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually developed to be a fairly explosive bencher for where my bench is worth, but I can't grind worth anything because every rep I get under, it's always go as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, it's interesting to see the different people coming in. Some people, all they can do is grind. They can't.
Yeah.
So
I'm with you. I can't grind through a lift to save my life. I mean, it's more of I either have it and I know it, or I don't. There's just no in between.
But with that, I mean, Olympic background, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And there's some of the guys I still stay in touch with from Ball State. I need to do a better job of just staying up with everybody on a regular basis, but I don't know. It's once you get out in professional setting,
the
day-to-day, and it goes so fast. But, I'll see some of the guys that I went to school with doing their thing and lifting, and man, you just grinded through that squat for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
And, I'll explain that to kids, and they're like, 3 seconds is not a long time. It's when it's fucking heavy, it is.
Yeah. When you can, I mean, I can grind through some, but that's not my forte usually is to grind. But when you've got enough time to think about it on the way up, that's when you're in trouble.
Because then you lose focus and you're loosening other areas up, probably, right?
It's just oh wow, this is going to be, for me, it's this is going to be a fight. And usually I can tell, my last heavy squat in a meet, I kind of folded a little bit in the bottom. I was like, man, this is going to be so hard. It's I can't get this back. I've collapsed a little, and there's no one collapsing. I just got to stand up with it. So I remember just squeeze everything really hard and keep going, and it moved and stopped and moved and stopped, and eventually I got it. But it was.
So do you have a video of that?
Yeah, it's probably on my Instagram. I think it's from a while ago. It was the meet I tore my hamstring on the deadlift, but
oh shit.
Yeah. So
when you went back and looked at the video, was it as bad as you thought it was?
No, but I could just feel it. I was I know where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not there.
Right.
Yeah, you couldn't. It's a little hard to see from the video, I think.
Yeah.
But I could definitely feel on the way down, something moved and it shouldn't have. I lost my arch a little. And
that's another thing I try to get these younger athletes to understand is the technicality of what you guys do is so high, and to the untrained eye, those kids aren't going to see if I was to show them a side by side of your best bench versus the one where you collapsed or whatever, they probably wouldn't notice a difference.
Yeah.
But for you, if you noticed a couple inches or maybe a 1 inch shift, I don't know. It's that's a big time adjustment, especially when you're under a maximal or
under maximal. That's making you're missing it. Yeah.
So so you mentioned. So when did you tear your hamstring?
Oh, was that 2018? I think. That it was I remember I was having a decent meet until the deadlift. And I think at that point, I drank like 2.5 gallons of fluid through the 5 or 6 hour meet.
Mm-hmm.
The platform was just ridiculously hot. So I think I was just a little dehydrated. And yeah, I know, I just went to pull on it and I kind of felt like, I don't know if you ever torn a
Yep.
fairly big muscle, but it feels like Velcro.
Yep. Torn both, actually.
It bruised up really nicely too.
Was it 1, 2, 3? How serious was it?
It was I think they said it was a 2.
So some pretty significant black
Yeah.
and blue.
Oh yeah, my whole leg. We had a 6 hour car ride home, so then my whole lower leg got filled with fluid. But there's a very nice benefit to working in a physical therapy department. As I limped in there next day in shorts, and I was like, "How bad is it?" Then they put me on a program to get it back, and it came back fine. But I mean, that's plays to the games, I guess. You try to test your limits, and sometimes you find them.
So when you got back, I'm sure you pulled that weight since the injury, right?
I don't know. Yeah, it wasn't a very big deadlift. I think I have, yeah.
Because I mean, did that mess with you psychologically when you're getting back to that weight, where you're just like, I'm just going to go do my thing, or?
The weights don't really ever really mess with. If I'm walking up to weight and I'm scared of it, I'm in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people in competition, they don't want to be told what's on the bar. Like they're nervous about it.
Huh.
I got really mad at one of my training partners once at a meet because he didn't want to tell me it was on the bar for my next squat. And I just started like, I'm like, tell me it's on the bar, or I'm going to, got real upset. So I finally told him, because that's my motivating factor.
Mm.
So the weights don't really scare me.
Yeah.
The one time I can remember, I was like, I need to go fix something to do. It was really dumb. I think I was using a false grip for some reason on the bench, and I pressed it as fast as I could with like 3 plates on it, and it actually spun out of my left hand and fell on my ribs.
Ooh.
So no one expected. So it took him a second to grab it, but I got up, stood off the bench, walked back down, and then benched it again, just because I need to make sure I'm not afraid of weights.
Right.
Huh. So it was a dumb thing that my wrist got a little off angle, and it spun it out.
So do you mainly do like a false grip? Is that a normal? Okay.
I think for that time I was either just experimenting with it for like the day, or maybe like I had the bicep pain, so I tried to switch to that or something.
Yeah.
But
so, jeez, dude. So did that break any ribs in there or anything?
No, it was like right 3 inches off the chest, but when the Olympic bars spin, you can hear them. I heard that, and I'm like, "What is going?" Oh, that's fell on me. So,
yeah. So I was gonna ask, like, what do you do for preventative, to prevent injury? Because you've had a relatively injury-free career so far.
I've had a couple decent ones. The hamstring tear was one. And the last time I went to compete at the Arnold, I've gone twice. The last time I went to compete, actually had a partial tear of a quad tendon on my last warm-up squat. Kind of a freak thing. Again, I think I was dehydrated again.
Yeah.
Because it was rushed and sweat, and all that pressure. And I was not good at keeping salt in my system to keep hydrated for that.
Yeah.
But the one thing is that any injury I usually get, or the major ones I've had, they've been at meets, not during training. So, me, if it happens at a meet, it happens. That's where I'm pushing it a little bit. Training, I haven't really had much. I started doing a lot more warm-ups, especially since I'm actually getting old now. Yeah. I'm 34, I'll be 35 this year, so I've started implementing a lot more warm-ups. Our warm-ups right now as the team will usually crush a new person for about 2 weeks. Uh, it's like 100 belt squats, so sets of 25 belt squat, and then a leg curl or a back extension or hyper or face pull. Um, dumbbell presses. I'll do 4 sets of 25 there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot more warming up with that. And then if anything starts to feel a little off, um, getting that addressed before it ever feels bad,
Right.
which is a big thing. And it's a pain because it's like you can't let off. I let off on my. Let me see my. Not very flexible. My supination there for a little long, and that's actually I've improved it a lot since I started focusing on it again.
Mm-hmm.
But that started to torque me a little bit on the deadlift, so I had to go back and focus on that. So we do a lot of prehab on the shoulder work,
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of the rotator, external rotator cuff stuff, a lot of the rhomboids and middle trap work there to keep the shoulder blades back.
Mm-hmm.
We started out more adductor work in, because that's a major player in the squat too.
Yep.
We concentrate the adductor magnus. Other things that bothering people. Forearms are always a little tricky. The guys just seem to get tight muscles here and there with them, with the extensors sometimes, and flexors usually okay. But either working foam rolling is, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Kind of up in the air on that one.
Muscle work in there and breaking it up is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
So the muscle work, some Graston sometimes. One of my lifters, she's an LMT, so it's nice to have around. She'll take a look at me every now and then, and really just making sure that when you get in a position that you can hold that position, and if something starts, like if you can hold your bench press position well, when people start getting out of positions, when they start having problems. So figuring out as soon as we can, if they're out of position, is it because of pain, or is it because of just a lack of focus? Even addressing that first, if we can, and then seeing if any muscle imbalance is going on or a muscle weakness on their position too.
Gotcha. So that sounds similar to what I've seen from Winning, as far as that 4x25.
Yeah, I steal a lot from him. So
he's a smart dude. Like I've played around with a little bit of that 4x25 stuff for a little bit.
It really increased my endurance, which is terrible. But I did ramp up the dumbbells once to see what I do. I barely made it through a 4x25 of 100 pounds. Yeah, the workout wasn't great after that, but I did 20,000 pounds of pressing work before I got to the workout.
And we've got a belt squat in storage right now. We just don't have the space. I'll show you the weight room there in a little bit, but I mean we've got 1,000 square feet on the rubber and then like 20 yards of turf. So everything we have to make sure it's, we got to make the most of what we've got. So it's a pretty bare bones weight room, but we've got a belt squat in storage. I totally really, really want to start using it, but there's just no space.
We should be coming out, I think, in April. Had some physical therapy students do research on Winning's belt squat with muscle activity and stuff, and obviously it doesn't really it doesn't place as much stress on the low back, but no one actually looked at to see how much less it was.
Yep.
We did that and then looked to compare that to a normal squat too, with the same weights.
And I saw something from Duffin where he was talking about the belt squat, and he was saying like people put the belt in the wrong position, and then they're tilted too much forward, and then you're not getting the pull at the hips that you want. It translates further up the chain, which I think is more into the low back, which is what you want to avoid.
Yeah, I mean if you put the belt up way high on your low back, it's going to pull you into that lordotic spine even more, and then you can start to have some issues too. So really,
you're keeping it pretty low. So when you're okay. What else? Oh, so like what other toys do you guys have? I'm sure you have like a glute ham, reverse hyper.
Yeah.
What other kind of specialized tools do you guys use?
So we've got, say small. I get the small weight room. So our gym's in my garage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's about 1,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
Push it a little bit.
It looks bigger online, man.
Good videos, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, we've got two monoliths actually, which is kind of necessary for if we have two groups. Usually have two groups training at a time.
Hmm.
So monos going. We've got a Camber Bar, a safety bar, fat bar, football bar, a curl bar just for triceps and curls. Um, the earthquake bar, which we've done some research in the lab on that too. Um, and then you got the heaviest glute hammer he's ever made. A reverse hyper, some pull downs. We got a couple of back machines, but we don't really have very many machines.
Yeah.
They just, if you can only do one exercise, it's got to be a really good exercise for it to be able to take up space in our place. And we have a belt squat machine too.
Yeah. And then are you doing a variety of exercises with that belt squat? Because I've seen women get kind of creative with that, with doing some rows and some good morning, like all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when it's at your house, sometimes you just wander out and kind of play with what you can set up and do those sorts of things. So we definitely used it for rows, single and double arm before. The single leg stuff was a little tricky on ours. It's a different model, but you could do them too.
Man, we've got so a couple things that we've seen, which I'm sure you've seen as well, are got that Spud Inc. Low pulley, high pulley system.
Yeah.
And we've got that. That's been a great tool because you can either buy a lat pull down and find space for it for $3,000, or you can use a Spud piece for under $200. And it's been a really good tool so far for lat pull downs, low rows, all that stuff. And I mean, you can do triceps, biceps, all that. But then this other thing that we got from Rogue, it says it's only made for Rogue, but I mean, if you have an elite rack, it'll fit in the elite rack.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a single leg. It's a rear foot elevated, and it just goes right through the gauge, and then has a little spin wheel, and tightens that down. That way, we can still do some rear foot elevated and not take up a ton of space. So, yeah, man, I think that's about everything we've got. Oh, and we got a couple Airdyne because Rogue had a big sale on them. So, and that's the other thing, is making sure the athletes understand the terminology, so we're all on the same page, because they'll say the word power and totally talking about a max effort squat, and it's like,
all the time,
guys, power right here, and it has to be a much lighter weight than what you're describing that you told me you did in the weight room at school. It's just, I don't know, man. But anyway, well, hey, I don't want to take up too much more of your time.